All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Financial Fridays workshop, Taxes 101. My name is Lindsay Bertram, and I am the program manager for Financial Wellness at Penn. Today, I'm going to serve as a moderator throughout today's presentation. We are joined by some guests from the Office of Corporate Tax Compliance and Payroll. So I'm going to ask Marianne and Karen to introduce themselves briefly. Marianne, you want to go?
Yep, I am Marianne Piccolo. I'm the Associate Controller for Corporate Tax Compliance and Payroll, and I've been an employee at Penn for 21 years. I started when I was 13.
And I'm Karen Kinney, and I'm Associate General Counsel advising the university and the health system in areas of taxation and benefits.
Nice, thank you. So throughout the presentation today, we are going to pause periodically to take questions. So whenever you have a question, you can send it in the main chat or directly to me. We will keep track of it, and then I will pass it along to Marianne when it's relevant. Additionally, various slides will have links on them. You're going to receive a PDF of the slides early next week, along with the recording. That way you can click the links. So you're not missing out on anything included in the presentation today. And then lastly, I want to highlight that today's workshop is going to be most relevant for domestic students. If you are an international student looking to learn more about taxes, you are welcome to stay in today's workshop, but we also think you're going to get the most benefit out of attending some of the workshops that International Student and Scholar Services are putting on related to taxes. So in the follow-up email for this workshop, we will also include a link to where you can find information about their workshops. So I'm going to give a really brief introduction to the program that I manage, Financial Wellness at Penn, before we start talking about taxes. So our mission statement is on the screen if you would like to read it in more detail. But Financial Wellness at Penn is a program dedicated to helping students, both undergrad and graduate, learn about personal finance. And so we offer a variety of online resources and workshops for folks who want to learn more about personal finance. If you want to connect with us more, the last slide of this presentation is going to have our email address and some more information about how you can connect with us to learn more. And our website is also linked here. So that is all from me for now. So Marianne, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to jump on this call today. I'm kind of glad we're doing this before lunch so that you don't get sleepy from this awesome topic. You know, it's a good topic, and you know, I hope you can walk away with some great information, or at least get yourselves thinking. One of the things we do have to tell you, though, and you can see by this disclaimer, is that we cannot give you personal tax advice. You know, the reason for this is kind of to guide you, to get you to think about the questions that you may need to ask or that you may need to find more information of within your own personal finances. But hopefully we can direct you as well and give you a great overview to be able to do your taxes, to be able to understand what you need to do, why you need to do, you know, to file the returns, and why you need to pay attention to where you get your money from and what the impacts are. So with that, so just as an overview, we want to make sure, again, I probably basically just said this, is that you understand why you should file taxes, you know, to make it clear that, you know, as a college student, what are the considerations that you need to make or you need to think about as you move forward, and to understand when to file, how to file, where to file, federal, state, and the implications of those as well. There's a lot of unique tax considerations for college students, and we hope we can guide you in that direction. So, Lindsay. So the first piece is, why do I have to file my taxes? It's the law. No, just kidding. So Ben Franklin, a guy I'm sure you heard of, in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. I guess right now I'll choose the taxes. Go ahead, Lindsay. So one of the key reasons to file is, a lot of you probably are looking at statements that you're getting or income that you're getting, and understanding that, you're not paying taxes, or you're not paying a lot of taxes. But one of the main reasons is, if you are paying taxes, you probably can get a refund depending upon the amount that is owed, or that you have been paid. Excuse me, I'm tripping over my word. This is the same time every year. We go through this stuff, we look at it, and even people such as myself get all nervous about, do I have the proper forms? Did I do everything I need to do? And part of what you need to understand too is, this might not be so critical for you at this point in your life, but going forward, as you earn more money, when you leave Penn and you get these awesome jobs that are paying you buku bucks, you want to be able to manage those dollars to the best of your ability, and to understand what the implications are for your taxes as well. So I guess we can, and Karen and Lindsay, Paul, jump in if I'm kind of missing anything. So
I'm just going to jump in, Marianne, and make one comment
Sure.
for folks that say, oh, I don't want to file taxes, and there are those who, as a matter of belief, think it's wrong that we have to file taxes and we shouldn't have to. And however passionately you may hold that belief, what happens when you make money is that the W-2s and the 1099s that the issuers of the money send to you, they also send to the IRS. And at some point down the road, and yes, it could be 5 years from now, it could be 10, it could be 15 even. At that point, your obligation on the income that you earned is not only the tax, but it's interest and penalties. And it's a huge price tag to pay to hold on to that belief, or say, you know what, nobody's going to notice. So just so you understand what the audit trail is and how the IRS locates folks that don't file income taxes.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So the minimum income amount that you have to file taxes for depends upon what you're actually making, your earned income and unearned income. And what you have to, again, be careful of is, even though you may not have to file taxes because you don't make enough, you may be owed those taxes back to you. And if you don't file, you won't get the taxes back. So the difference between earned income and unearned income is kind of simple. The earned income is the money that you get for doing something, your compensation for work that you've performed. So, that could be anything from your, as Karen said, you'll get on a W-2, you're paid weekly. That could be your work study money that you get from Penn, as well as if you hold another position outside of Penn. You'll get 2 W-2s. The unearned income is income that you get from interest, some of your investments. If you have investments, you might get one from a bank statement that shows interest that you've received from. You might get a 1099 from the INT from a bank for interest that you received from money that is sitting in an account of yours. And not so much derived from work, and they're taxed a little differently. And we'll go through some of that as well. So there's tools that are out there, as Lindsay put together on this lovely slide, that will basically show you what you're required to file on your income tax return. So as she said in the beginning, you'll have this link and you can look at it and run through it and see if you're getting, and we'll talk about that as well, getting the forms that you need for the work or those that extra income that you may have earned during the year. So one of the most important things that you will have to do for every job is to fill out this W-4. And the W-4 itself changed in, I think it was 2018, right, Karen? 2018, and it looks incredibly complicated and it's crazy, but it really isn't that. Don't be afraid of it. You will have to fill this out for every job you have from this day forward. And if you haven't done it before, which I'm sure some of you already have, you'll know that it's kind of, process that you have to do. One of the key things is you also should look at this on an annual basis, because there could be changes within your current life cycle and your job itself that may want to adjust how money is taken out of your account, when it's taken out, and how to put in for your exemptions and so forth. One of the great things is the IRS W-4 estimator that they put out at the beginning of, I think it was 2018, or it could have been 19. However, and you should do that every year to kind of look back and what happened the year before and fill it out, which reminds me, I didn't do it for this year. Yay me. So it's not, like I said, it's not very complicated. And we've provided some links. The tip sheet is the W-4 tip sheet that Lindsay's identified here, is what you will see in Workday. Part of Workday, and I'm going to put in a plug because it's payroll, is that we are connected to, it's called BSI. There are kind of tax interface within the payroll environment. And if you're going in and working here at Penn or anywhere else, they're going to ask you for certain forms to fill out. It could be exemption forms in the current area that you're in. Pay attention to the notices that you get through Workday. You do have to go in and complete them. And even if it's basically, no, I don't really have to complete it, just submit it as, that you've gone through and looked at it, because it could affect how taxes are taken out of your pay.
And just to add to the, this really isn't that bad. My daughter recently got her first job and she gave me the W-4 form, and it's like 6 pages long. And she's like, Mom, look at this big form I have to fill out. And I said, you really only need to fill out and turn back in. Your employer is going to be looking for it, that first page. So the rest of the form is designed to help you calculate what should be withheld from your pay. So
Right.
you have to owe a tax bill. And also for a single taxpayer, the way most of you are going to be with who doesn't itemize deductions, it should be a fairly quick form to fill out, notwithstanding the fact that it's really great to go through the calculation. But the only form you need to give back, part of that form, is that I think it's just that first page.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So where should you file? I get, this has been really complicated with COVID because a lot of people, employees, staff, students are working remotely. So there's been a lot of complication as to where you need to file, what you need to file. So it depends upon where you work and where you live. So a reciprocity agreement is an agreement between 2 states so that allows you to only withhold taxes in one place. And be able to kind of fill out the right forms and, actually going through that W-4 process. If you're in New Jersey or any of the states listed below and you're working, you may have to fill out an exemption form for one of those states. So you have to learn by your location what is required from you. I'll give you an example within Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania, they use what's called Act 32, and they look at where you live and where you work. And from a local standpoint, they're going to withhold the higher of where you work or where you live for local taxes. For the most part, it's always Philadelphia. As a non-resident, Philadelphia taxes are high, and you'll always most likely have to withhold from Philadelphia. But in some cases, there may be that you're working in another area, you'll see that difference come through. So especially with remote right now, we're not, as a student, you're directly connected to Philadelphia. It's a little different than if you were an employee, but if you're employed somewhere else and you're working at home, there may be a change in your work address. So just keep that in mind as you're going forward. And fill out the proper forms when you go through your any change in your work or home address. Lizzie can go on. So any questions, anything come up within that conversation between Karen and I? Nope, nothing?
So there are two questions that came through. One of them is related to a topic we're going to cover later, so I'm going to hold that one.
Okay,
Someone just sent me a question saying, if I live and work in Pennsylvania but file taxes in New York, do I have taxes withheld and file taxes in both?
so if you live and work now in Pennsylvania, you have to look at how you're being viewed as a student worker, because it's dependent upon the number of days. If your primary residence is New York, you most likely will be withheld tax in New York. But that's something you have to kind of look at with with somebody that can kind of go through your personal income tax to understand where you are and where you need to be from a tax perspective.
There's also the distinction between a resident and a non-resident filing, and you sort of have to put your stake in the ground, paying attention to the rules along the way. But for example, college students often retain their state that they came from as their residence until they graduate. And that way they'd be filing a non-resident tax return if they're a different state. You can't always do that because, as Mary Ann talks about, they may measure number of days.
Right.
But just decide where you need to decide which state you want to be a resident of, kind of in the foreseeable future. And that concept of residency is about, like, where do you vote? Like, where does all your mail get sent?
Your driver's license.
Driver's license. And I tend to advise people to hang on to that as long as you can legally, and then you can file as a non-resident in any other state that you're working in, and hope they don't pull you into resident status. As Mary Ann says, it has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. You can't always do it, but.
And that's why it's important. What we always say is that you really should consult with a tax advisor to be able to differentiate between where you have to file and what you need to include.
Yeah.
Great. So we're getting a lot of questions, some of which will be addressed later on. So I'm going to select what I sent to you now. I also want to be really mindful of time. We've only gotten through a short portion of the presentation. So one student did ask, what if I live abroad? I think the answer probably depends on whether you're a US resident living abroad or if you are an international student. So the person that sent that, if you want to clarify real quick.
I'm a US citizen, but I live abroad. Like, I've lived my entire life outside of the United States. So I don't have like a state ID or anything like that. Because I lived abroad my entire life.
So as a US citizen in general, Daniela, a US citizen is taxed on worldwide income. Because you've lived abroad your entire life, I think you need to consult with someone in country for you to be able to understand what your obligations are.
Okay.
Great. One more question that I think is related to what we've covered so far. Someone is asking, do you need to fill out the W-4 if your program/employer withholds for you?
Yes. That's what the W-4 is for, so we can withhold. Any employer is an agent of the IRS, and that's the form that the IRS requires us to send them for every employee.
Great.
If your employer hasn't given you a Form W-4 or asked you for one, that's something you should ask them to do or submit on your own. They should be giving that to you when you start employment.
Correct.
Great. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section. A few folks have sent questions about what is considered earned versus unearned income. We're going to cover that later on. So I will save those questions for then.
So a big question is, what role do your parents play? If you were like my daughter, you were on the parent payroll for way too long. But anyway, that's just me. So you should have a conversation with your parents prior to them filing as well, to determine if they are going to claim you as a dependent. So there may be some benefit for your parents to claim you as a dependent, and there may be some benefit for you to be not dependent on your parents' return, but you have to figure that out with your parents. So if your parents claim you on their taxes, they claim certain tax benefits associated with having you as a dependent. As a dependent, then you do not qualify for those tax benefits. So that's why you have to kind of talk to them and figure out, does it make better sense for them to file or for you to file? File as a dependent versus not file. So once your parents claim you, they can also claim your scholarships and stuff like that, so that you'll be your scholarships, your tuitions, grants, anything, and your 1098-T information. So again, you really need to discuss it with them and see what you need to do and what the threshold is for them versus you filing returns. And by the way, if you're dependent on your parents, you may also still have to file a return. You just don't won't get a lot of the credit or a lot of be able to take some of the benefits of what you have from your return versus your parents.
Yeah, and if you're one of those students that has a parent that prepares your return for you, I would suggest, I just walked through this with my son on Zoom. We did TurboTax. He had control of the screen, and we went through every single line item of his tax return and filed it together. It's a great favor that they're doing that work for you, but it's not a favor at the end of the day, because you're going to need to learn to do it on your own. So I thought Zoom presented a wonderful way for that transition to take place, and I think he actually enjoyed the process, so that was great.
Any questions from that section?
I haven't received any questions about dependency status, but if folks have them, please send them in the chat. I think we can go ahead and move on, and we can address them at the end if they come up, because it's a short section.
Yep, so this section is what income is taxable for students. Flip, there we go. Look at that cute little kid. I think we used him last year. He's probably 8 years old now. So even there's a couple of things. We talked about employment compensation income. When you are getting money for working, you'll get a W-2 from your employer. And for us, it's whether it's work study, and it could be non-work study compensation. Whatever that is, you should be getting a W-2 from your employer. They're obligated to withhold, they're obligated to report on your behalf. If you get a prize or an award, it's considered 1099 miscellaneous income. And what the distinction is here is employment income, you pay your federal, your state, your city, your FICA, Medicare, all of those taxes. Well, you guys probably don't, you're not paying FICA because you're students, but for prizes and award, it's federal and state for the most part. And it's taxed differently, and it's input differently on your tax return as well. Same with the human subject payment. If any of you are involved in any of the clinical trials on campus, you will get a 1099, and you get a 1099 if your aggregate dollar amount in the course of a year is $600 or more. Now that means that we're obligated to report to you, to report on a 1099, anything that's over $600, but that also means that anything under $600 is still income to you, and potentially you should be paying taxes on it, potentially. Wink, wink, not that. That includes some of your externship payments. If you're getting a grant for working from Penn for working at another third party, that is being paid through our accounts payable department, and a 1099 will be issued to you. Okay. Scholarships and fellowships. So essentially, a scholarship and fellowship for tax purposes are about handled the same. And you will be responsible for paying taxes on anything that's considered a non-qualified benefit. And a non-qualified benefit includes things like room and board, travel, research. You know, if you're getting, if we're paying or someone is a third party is paying a health benefit, any equipment or other expenses that is not part of your condition of student, of your eligible, what's the word I'm looking for? Of your amounts towards your actual tuition. So the qualified portion is your tuition, your fees, your books, your course material. And sometimes it could include a computer, a laptop, or something like that, but only if a qualified equipment is only if it is a requirement of your course of study. So you differentiate between qualified and non-qualified is what do you need to be able to go through this course that's a qualified expenses, that's part of the tuition, the base cost, and what isn't. So like room and board is probably the biggest thing that I can think of from a non-qualified expenses. So you will normally, you could get a 1098T from the university. You would get that if your educational expenses exceed qualified. Am I saying that right, Karen? I'm doing it backwards. Maybe.
Yeah, and even qualified, often
Right.
you'll just receive a 1098T that shows the qualified expenses,
Right.
amounts that are not taxable. So
Right.
it's informational for money taxpayers, and if your parents are claiming you, typically you just give it to them because they're the only ones that can have any benefit from it.
Right.
But it should include both the qualified and the non-qualified income to you. This is money in the door. If you go out and buy yourself a computer, that's not income to you. That's you spending your money.
Right.
If your parents buy you a computer, that's not income to you. You're their dependent. That's a gift essentially. So, so yeah, the 1098 is something that'll come in the mail and should get to the person who's paying the most taxes, I would say. But maybe not. If you're not a dependent, then I think then you can take advantage of it. So.
Okay. Any questions? Anything come up on that piece?
Yeah, so since we've talked about taxable income now, I'm gonna go ahead and ask the questions that came through earlier. So one student has asked, does unemployment income count as earned or unearned income?
I think that's still counted as earned income. You've got to look at the state in which you're getting unemployment from, and they will should outline what that's for. You should have always had, you should have federal taxes withheld from it, but you may want to look at the state implications for unemployment.
Great. And then we also got a question asking, does a PhD fellowship count as earned income? And I think that depends, right?
It does depend, and there's a matrix out on our website that you'll be able to look at. So if the dollars are coming because you're in the section of your training that says you must work at doing something, then that's compensation.
Right.
If it's towards your course of studies, then it's fellowship or scholarship. So it's differentiated that way. And your school or center that gives that those fees to you should be able to distinguish where you are in your course of study in order for it to be considered compensation or non-compensation.
Great. Okay.
But there is a matrix, so please,
Yeah.
Go out and take a look at it. It's got some decent information out there.
Great. Okay. We have also received questions about forms. So I think let's move on to that section and then we can address the questions that have come through.
Sure. So there's a group of forms. We mentioned some of them before, so we'll just go through this relatively quickly. The W-2 reports your wages from your employees, and if you work in more than one, for more than one organization, you'll get more than one W-2, and you'll need to make sure that you put both of them or all of them on your tax return. The 1042-S is a report of payment to non-resident aliens. You can also get, if you're a non-resident alien, you can also get a W-2 and a 1042. And there's a differentiation between how you have to report it. And as Lindsay said, if you are a non-resident alien, I would make sure that you take the course that relates to in filing your forms as an NRA, as a non-resident alien. The 1099 miss, again, miscellaneous income. So if you're getting miscellaneous income from various sources, like we talked about, if you get an award or a prize and you get a human subject payment or anything else that's, through the university that's not considered compensation, those dollars will be aggregated. So if you made $400 in a prize, but you made $350 from a human subject payment, you'll get a return for $750. It's not looked at as an individual payments, it's aggregated for the calendar year. So just make sure you understand that. The 1099
withheld either on those.
Right, taxes are not withheld through a 1099, but they are reportable and taxable. So you'll have to report them and tax them. And I did see another, something came through from, it popped up on here about a fellowship payment. You're correct. Even though we're not withholding for a fellowship payment, there may be instances where that payment is taxable to you. And again, it goes back to how you use those funds for qualified expenses or non-qualified expenses. So you have to keep track of that. We talked about the 1099 INT, that reports interest income. You'll get that from various sources. If you have funds that are in different bank accounts and you're earning interest or other areas, you'll get a form for those dollars as well. We talked about the 1098T, which is reports the payments that were made on your behalf to the university to cover your qualified educational expenses. And the 1098E reports interest you paid on your student loans. So here's the big scary W-2. It's really not that big and scary, but it's a good document. We won't go through this in detail because obviously, there's a lot of stuff in here. And I think I went over it a lot in detail last year and everybody was like, what the hell is she talking about? But the link on the bottom, the W-2 explanation, is really good information for you to read through and understand why the amounts in each of those sections are different. You'll always have your employer's identification number on it and information. And a lot of these returns are downloadable on W-2, on TurboTax and those type of things. But I am going to put a big plug in here right now. If you are currently getting a printed copy of the W-2, you really need to think about that. All of these are available on our website for you to download. And in most cases, a lot of organizations that you're working for, you can get these electronically. I tell you this because for two reasons. If you don't elect to get an electronic version versus a printed copy, that printed copy is going to an address that may not be where you are. If you haven't changed your address in the system, your primary location, your current residence and all of that. That information has your social security number on it, and you do not want that to get into the hands of other people. So I strongly advise you to get these type of documents electronically that only you can get, that you can download, that you can view. We've gotten a lot of complaints about people who have there's a lot of scams going on, that people that dig through mailboxes to look for W-2s to grab somebody's a social security number. So you need to make sure that that you're aware of where your W-2 is going. We get thousands of them back in the mail because they're undeliverable. So I ask you to please go in and elect electronically. We can't mandate it, but it's in your best interest. My plug, off my soapbox. Any questions there?
Okay, so we do have some questions about forms. And a few just came in that I haven't had the chance to read through fully, but we've gotten a few questions related to how to file taxes when you are investing. So I guess just to give could you give a quick overview of what forms you might receive if you're using apps to invest, and like how are capital gains taxed?
I don't think I can answer for you capital gains. That is based, I'm gonna play my party line. Really contact your tax advisor.
Yeah.
You know, you need to understand what your investment was for, what you're gonna get. Is this something that, you know, you have earnings on? It's earnings versus, you know, are they distributed? Are they reinvested? And there's, and I don't even remember the form numbers that come through for the investments. But, and Karen, maybe you do.
I don't remember the numbers, but there's, you know, any brokerage firm or investment bank will send out forms at the end of the year that show your interest, your dividends, your qualified dividends, and your capital gains. And it's outside the scope of this particular presentation to tell you, you know, how capital gains are taxed and how dividends are. But the point being, when you do file your taxes and you walk through several of these free services, they'll ask you, do you have this form? Does it have this on it? And it, you know, some of the free tax services are very educational, and I think that even to get a good understanding of how those amounts will be taxed, you can walk through some of those free services on a sort of phantom basis and not file yet. And if it's anything significant or complicated, I really would urge you to talk to somebody who knows about taxes and can advise you.
Yeah, I also personally use an app to invest as well. I use Acorns. So from my experience, they sent me via email the form that I needed. And so like Karen just said, if you're using an online resource like TurboTax or something like that, they will prompt you with questions so you know where to input it. If you're working with an individual to do your taxes, give them every single form that you receive related to taxes. They will know what to do with it. That's the easiest way to understand what to do there. We did get a question about the 1098-T. So a student is asking, their form says that the amount included in box 1 indicates or includes amounts for an academic period beginning January through March 2021. So given that the numbers include 2021 and they're filing for 2020, did they adjust that in any way?
I don't know why they would give you one for 2021.
Well, maybe they do it by semester. I think because
Do it semester basis?
they do it semester, and their fiscal year is different. The IRS fiscal year and an individual's fiscal year is different from our fiscal year as a university. So I'm not sure how they handle that. They may just scoop it into the previous calendar year, and that's why it's on the 1098-T that way. We can look at it and get back to the person afterwards.
Yeah.
That way.
Okay.
That would be my guess.
Yeah, if the person who sent that question could just follow up with our email at the end, we'll try to get an answer.
Yeah. It's a good idea. I'd like to know the answer to that too.
Me too.
So we got another question. So a student says they received a W-2 form provided by the school since they're a work study student, but their social security number was wrong. They've never
Go back
seen
to
that
your administrator right away. Because what that means is we should be issuing a W-2C to you to make the corrected change. So go back to whoever you're working for, and they'll have to go in, and you probably have to go through the onboarding process again to make sure that you get your social social security number in there correctly. A third party has to put it in and see your social security card. So when there's a correction, so keep that in mind.
Great. And then otherwise, we've received 2 questions about the W-2 that actually have really quick answers. One is, where do I access the W-2? You can access that in Workday. It's really straightforward. When you look at your pay, on the right-hand side, there is a link that says tax documents. So you should be able to find it there. Second question about the W-2 is, it looks like it's already filled out for me already. Yes, that's exactly how it's supposed to work. Your employer sends you an overview of what you've earned and what's been taken out for taxes. So
Right, and that W-2 is part of your basis for filling out your tax return. And they will ask you, you know, as Karen said, if you're using a TurboTax or any of those, you know, type of systems, then they're going to ask you what's in each of those boxes on the whole thing. And then they'll put it in the right subsection of the return.
perfect. Okay. Those are all the questions we've received about forms. For folks who've sent questions about like how to find an individual preparer and whatnot, we'll talk about resources at the end. Marianne, you want to move into credits and deductions?
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. Yep. So the difference between tax credits and tax deductions, and kind of simplistically right here in front of you is the tax credits reduce the amount of taxes you owe as a dollar for dollar. And some of those tax credits, the 5 biggest tax credits are like earned income tax credit that you may get, which is like an incentive for work, the American Opportunity Tax Credit that helps with higher education costs, and so on and so forth. Lifetime Learning Credit, you may have heard about these type of things that are available to you or could be available to you. So you might look into that a little bit further. Tax deductions actually reduce the amount of income that is taxable. So if you think about it from your actual compensation perspective, we have contributions to healthcare plans, and those are pre-tax based. So that means if you're making $1,000 and your monthly amount that you have to pay for your pre-tax health benefit is $100, you're only taxed on $900. So the way it works in the system is you have your gross pay, your pre-tax deductions, and then your net income that is taxable to you. And you can kind of see that if you look at your ongoing pay slips. If you have any pre-tax deductions, you can get to that. And those are, you know, kind of will reduce your income bracket in some cases. Anything else on that, Karen, that we should address? I think that's about it.
Nothing except to say tax credits are better than tax deductions.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because let's say you make $100 and you get a deduction, you take 20 of it off, then you pay tax on the remaining $80, right?
Mhm.
Let's say you make $100 and your effective tax rate is $20, or your tax by the time you calculate it is $20. Then you get a tax credit for $20, and then it reduces to zip. So it's if there's ever a choice between a deduction and a credit, look to the credit first and see whether you qualify for that. And if not, see if you can take it as a deduction.
Mhm.
Wait, can you explain that again? Sorry.
Oh, sure. So tax is computed as a percentage of your income, right? So let's say you make $100. Let's just say you need to pay an effective tax rate of 20% of that. That means your tax due is $20, right? See that? So there you are writing your check for $20. So let's say you make $100 and your effective rate is 20%. You got $20 in tax you have to pay, but you have a tax credit available to you. Then you would pay, have that applied against the $20 and you owe $0. Whereas if you took it as a deduction off the 100, that would bring your taxable income down to 80. Let me make sure I'm doing that right. And 20% of 80 is then was it $40 there, Marianne? I'm trying to do the math, but
You know what, you're.
yeah, I'm
you're
sorry.
losing me.
But effectively,
Numbers, but yeah.
it's because you're working as a percentage of your income. That's what basically the deduction is applied above the line, which means it reduces the total against which the percentage is applied. Whereas the tax credit is below the line, which means the percentage of tax is already applied and then it's directly applied against the tax due.
Right.
So
And the deductions, the tax deductions like healthcare benefits and other benefits only reduce certain types of taxes like federal. That may not reduce state taxes.
yeah, I'm not going to do this again next year, Marianne. I'm not doing this math in front of the whole group.
We should give an example next
We can
year.
fix the slide.
Make a note that there's an example of what it looks like to do a tax credit versus what it looks like to do to have a deduction. And your deductions might be automatic. So your tax deductions.
That's true.
Thank you. That makes sense. I think I'm just confused. So how do you is it something you choose between when you're filing taxes, or does your employer choose for you?
You choose as the taxpayer when you fill out your return which one you want to use. Often, if you're making not that much, you're just going to use the standard deduction and you're not going to have the credits available to you. But it really is going to depend on your individual situation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so now we get to how do I file this good stuff?
Yes, I do want to throw in one quick question we've received before we move on. So can you just briefly explain what a tax year is? So there's a student who's confused about, if I file before the deadline, do I need to file again because I've earned income between the time that I filed and April 15th, basically?
No. So you're filing taxes based upon a calendar year. All U.S. citizens are taxed on calendar year income, so January to December. So what the IRS does is they've given you kind of 3.5 months to file that return for the prior year. So anything that you make from January to April 15th is for 2021. So then you'll get those returns or those forms in January, February of the following year, 22. So you're kind of filing behind a little bit.
Right.
Great. Thank you for that, Marianne.
Mhm.
All right. And I think the only other questions we have are related to this topic. So I think let's get into it.
Okay. So every year, your tax year is April 15th. Last year was a little weird because they gave it extensions for filing. So, but April 15th is the deadline, midnight, April 15th. You have to have your return entered and accepted through online services, or you have to have it postmarked by April 15th if you're sending it in. Most students can file for free. And there's 2 services that you can file in. The irs.gov is a good one, as well as TurboTax. TurboTax will kind of walk you through everything, which might be beneficial for especially your first time going through this. Walk through each of the subsections and there's little information bullets in there that bring you to why you need to do this, what this means, how to look at it on your forms and so forth. So that could be helpful. You can have a professional file your taxes, and we're not supporting any of them, but there's organizations like H&R Block and others that are out there that will do it for a fee. And you could take a look online for that. There are volunteers, the VITA program, and the link there will get you to some information about that as well. So you filed your tax return and you breathe a sigh of relief and wait for that money to come in. I'm going to caution you because I had to do this with my daughter. You should know better by now, but don't always expect to get money at the end of the year. There's a lot of changes that have happened in the course of the past couple of years with tax reform and the job cuts or the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So when you look at this stuff, you kind of want to make sure you're breaking even. You don't want the IRS to be holding your money for a year when you could have had it in a bank account somewhere along the line. So you're withholding more than you need to. You don't really want to do that, but you also don't want to under withhold, because Karen mentioned it before, there could be penalties and interest based on under withholding. So you want to be careful. And hopefully expect to get something back because you didn't expect it to begin with is a great thing. And you can go to the next one, Lindsay.
Yeah, so just to put a point on the filing deadline, sometimes the IRS system doesn't take your filing for one reason or another. It happens. It's happened to me several times. So you don't want to do it on midnight of April 15th because you can't say, oh, the system was down and wouldn't take my filing. So you want to try to get that electronic filing done a little ahead of time. And if you're going to do a paper filing instead, don't think you can FedEx it on April 15th because that doesn't count. They want that postmark. You could FedEx it as long as it arrives on or before April 15th. So I'd suggest the US mail if you're filing by paper, and make sure you can file electronically by taking a few days ahead of time to push the button and make sure it works.
Yep. So in taxication, I made this up. A feeling of euphoria getting a tax refund, a state that lasts until you realize it was your money to begin with. So there you go.
I love it.
Great. Okay, so we did have a few other questions that came through. Before folks start to file out, I just want to say thanks for attending today. Again, you will receive the slides with all the links. You will receive a recording early next week. We're also going to include this link to the evaluation. We use your responses to these evaluations as a way to improve future workshops. So please fill it out. I'm also going to send the link in the chat so that you can click on it directly. And if we encouraged you to email us after the fact, you can use the email address at the bottom of this slide right here and connect with us otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and share the questions that fell into the last category. And then if you have additional questions, please continue to send them in the chat and we will get them addressed in the next 6 minutes before 1 o'clock. So we did have one student who asked, I think earlier we said students can typically file for free. So the student just wants to clarify, when we graduate, do we need to pay to file taxes?
Yeah, it depends upon the service you use. So, if you use TurboTax, then yeah, you're going to have to pay. If you go to any outside service, another CPA, an H&R Block, you definitely have to pay to file your taxes. If you do them on your own, if you do them through the irs.gov, you can only do them up to a certain point. Then you are paying for your taxes, but that payment that you make can be deducted from your tax return.
It's really a payment for the service more than anything.
Right, it's payment for the service, not for the taxes, right? Correct.
Yeah. We just received a similar question that says, what services do you recommend using that will allow students to do it for free? Just to be clear, typically in my experience, whether it's free or not depends more on the complexity of your individual circumstances. It's not like filing in general costs money. I think someone also shared something about Hasan Minhaj's skit on whether TurboTax is actually free or not. So you can look at that. It really depends on your circumstances, is my understanding. Yeah,
that's right. There's a threshold, an income threshold that they give free service below.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One additional question about resources for help with filing. So someone says they're looking for a CPA, but not sure what a standard price is. Marianne and Karen, do you know what a typical price would be?
It depends upon where you're filing from. So if you're in a big city like Philadelphia, expect to pay more. If you're last minute and going to a CPA, expect to pay more. And if it's an easy form, you know, they can get you in and out of there. I don't really, I mean, I think you can find out what like H&R Block or any of those services are from looking on their website to see how much they charge. But I think, you know, it depends. It depends upon the type of CPA you go to and type of service you're using and where you're located as well.
And feel
And how
free
many
to ask.
returns you need
Feel
to
free
do.
to ask ahead of time before
Right.
you person the work.
You know, and you may have to file because you live in one state and work in another. You have 2 states to file from. So it's going to be a little bit more than if you're just filing in your home state.
I have a
Great.
question.
Go ahead.
What if I lived in the United States, but I'm not like a resident of a particular state? Like I don't have an ID. Like where do I file?
I think you're really going to have to talk to an advisor to figure out where you need to file from, or
Okay.
or who you need to file to, whether it's in
Where-
country or US.
Where do I find an advisor?
But if you're outside of the US, I don't know that I can help you with that. But you might want to, you know, check the websites for, you know, your situation. But you should go to wherever you're located currently right now, find a CPA, an accountant, a tax service that can help you answer those questions.
All right, thanks.
Great.
I think I saw a question about what if I get a 1099 that's less than $600? Should I still include it? Is that one that's on there?
Was that the question?
I don't
Yeah.
think we answered that yet. It was, what if I get a 1099, but it's, somebody's giving me a 1099 for an amount that's below the 600? Should I include that?
Yeah, you should include it, because if there's a form out there, you really should include it. And like I said earlier, even if you didn't get a 1099 for services or for something, I won't say services, I shouldn't, for like a prize and award that was under 600, you're basically still responsible for the taxes associated with that. It's a liability that you have.
Great. So we have 2 more questions in the chat. Hopefully we can get through them quickly. So one of them is, if I earned less than the taxable threshold of 12,000, do we still have to file credits and deductions, or do we just file the forms and then the IRS automatically refunds everything?
I think you've got to make sure that you're filing your information properly. Understand what your credits are, understand what your tax deductions are, and file your return.
And I think the only caveat is take a look at, if you have a W-2, take a look at it, see how much federal tax was withheld. And if you're below the federal threshold and federal tax was withheld, I'd take a gander that you may be entitled to some money back. So
Right.
that W-2 is your friend. Take a look at what you received as a W-2 and proceed accordingly, you know, according to each box.
Great. The final question we have is, someone is asking, can you please re-explain what we do with Penn Grant in terms of filing? I'm a little confused on qualified versus non-qualified expenses and what we have to file.
So that you might want to look at, was there a link out there between qualified? I don't think so. I don't think so. But if you
I can provide a link to the
Yeah.
IRS website explaining it.
yeah, there's a link on the IRS website that segregates what qualified versus unqualified is. And it depends upon what you use that money for. So again, if part of your course of study is your tuition, your course fees, lab fees, you know, it's a requirement of your course of study. You know, some books, those type of things, books are qualified. All of that is a qualified expense. So you've got to basically think, what did I spend all this money on? If you use part of a scholarship for housing, food, travel, healthcare benefits, anything other than what is outlined as qualified, and I think the IRS website will kind of lead you into more information. There's a lot of information out on the IRS website for students particularly, but also as a general course, if you just kind of want to search on a topic, you'll get that information. There's a lot of information out there. So a lot of your questions is a depends kind of thing. It depends, not that you wear depends, but it depends kind of thing. So just get to what you need to do on for that money. Do you know what you're getting the money for? And if you're getting a scholarship or a fellowship, and it would be a fellowship, because you have to have a service, because you have to do something to get that money, that's going to end up on your W-2. So you need to understand that as well. What am I getting the money for? And where is it going to come out at the end of the year? I don't know if that made that clearer or more like mud.
Thanks for that answer, Marianne. So we did just get one more question. It's just, how long do returns typically take to come out?
How long does it take, the returns take to do, you mean? Like,
So
actually,
I think it may be more of like, once you file, how long is it?
Oh.
Yeah, until you receive what you're.
if you file electronically, you're going to get if you're getting a refund, you're going to get it quicker. Okay. But in some cases you may not. So it's usually, I would say, expect it 4 to 6 weeks. In some cases, it might be more. If there's an issue with your return, you won't get it right away, and you probably won't get notified right away that there was a problem. So that, it could kind of extend when you get a refund, or you get information from the IRS. I'm going to make another plug here too, which I'm glad this came up. If anybody calls you from the IRS, tell them, see you later, hang up the phone. The IRS will never call you, never. What they will do is they will send a letter to your residence, and it might be what you have on your tax return, your prior tax return, on a W-2. If you didn't file a tax return, you should have, you will get a letter from the IRS at your residence. Okay, you will never get a phone call at all from them. So if anybody calls you, if anybody sends an email that says, I'm from the IRS and I need this information, don't ignore it, just ignore it. What they will do is, if you did get a letter and you didn't respond, they will send a certified letter. And then at some point you're going to have to respond. The only way that somebody would call you is if you connected with them because you got this letter and you got the name of a person that was on the letter and you're going to talk to them. Don't fall for the scams. There are a million of them out there. Be careful.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, we just got one more question, I think related to what you just said,
What
Marianne.
if the
So,
IRS sends a letter, but we're currently out? So here's what I'm gonna say. If you're changing your address, so, I'm gonna assume, let's just, I'll use a scenario. You're in a dorm right now and your address is your dorm. You're gonna leave for the summer. You're not going back to that dorm. Change your address. Go in and change the address so that if there is notification that it comes back to you, or go to the post office and make sure that anything that's, you could do a temporary change of address when you leave campus. Go to the post office, fill out the form so that any mail that goes to your current address will go to your home address, wherever that is.
perfect.
You may
Okay,
want it to go to your parents if you're like traveling all over the world in the summertime or something,
right.
just to make sure that anything is, everything that you need to get, you get.
Great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending and for asking your questions. And thanks to Marianne and Karen for joining us to help us with this presentation. So again, you will receive the recording so you can review it later. And yeah, please continue to connect with us in the future. Thanks. Have a good Friday.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Good luck with your taxes. I'm sure you will do fabulously. Not a word.